The Scarecrow and His Servant, Day 3. Chapter 5, Scarecrow for Hire. When the lawyer reached the town next morning, he found it full of strange rumors. After interviewing Mr. Rigatelli and the actress who played Queen Dido, who were both convinced that the Scarecrow was an automaton controlled by mesmeric waves as part of a plot organized by a rival theater company, Mr. Scarecrow found his way to the elderly umbrella salesman. "Yes, I seen it all," said the old man. "It was a boy with a horn gatang. I seen one of 'em before. They live in the trees in Borneo. Almost human they are, but you wouldn't mistake him close up. What'd you want him for? Has he escaped from a zoo?" "Not exactly," said Mr. Scarecrow. "Which way did they go?" "That way," said the old man, pointing. "You'll recognize him easy enough. They bought one of my umbrellas." The Scarecrow and his servant walked a long way that day. They spent the night under a hedge by an olive grove, and the moment they woke up, Jack knew something was wrong. He sat up and looked all around. The sun was shining, the air smelled of thyme and sage, and there was a sound of little bells round the necks of a herd of goats browsing nearby, but something was missing. "Master, wake up! Our bag's been stolen!" Jack cried in despair as soon as he realized what had happened. "All the food's gone!" The Scarecrow sat up at once and opened his umbrella with alarm. Jack was lifting stones, peering under the hedge, and running backward and forward to look up and down the road. The Scarecrow peered into the ditch, frowning at a lizard. It took no notice. Then he bent over and looked at something among the leaves. "A clue," he called, and Jack came running. "What, master?" "There," said the Scarecrow, using his pointing hand to indicate something small and unpleasant at his feet. "What is it?" "An owl pellet. You can take it from me. This was left by the culprit. No doubt about it. This thief is an owl." "Oh," said Jack, scratching his head. "Or a jackdaw," the Scarecrow went on. "In fact, now I think of it, it must have been a jackdaw, and he left the owl pellet to throw us off the scent. Can you believe the villainy of these birds? They have no shame." "No," said Jack, "none at all. Anyway, we haven't got any money, and we haven't got any food. I don't know what we're going to do." "We shall have to work for our living, dear boy," said the Scarecrow cheerfully, "but we are full of enterprise and both in the pink of health." "Ow, ow, what are you doing?" His last words were spoken to a goat, which had come up behind him and started to make a meal of his trousers. The Scarecrow turned and clouted the goat with his road sign, but the goat objected to this and butted him hard, knocking him over before Jack could catch him. The Scarecrow was astonished. "How dare you? What a cowardly attack," he said, struggling up. The goat charged him again. This time the Scarecrow was prepared. He opened his umbrella suddenly, and the goat skidded to a halt and started to eat that instead. "Oh, really?" said the Scarecrow. "This is too much." And then a tug-of-war began, with the goat at one end and the Scarecrow at the other. The rest of the goats came over to see what was happening, and one of them started nibbling at the Scarecrow's coat, another at his trousers, and a third began to browse on the straw coming out of his jacket. "Go on, scram, clear off," Jack called, clapping his hands, and reluctantly the goat slouched away. "You expect that sort of behavior from people with feathers," the Scarecrow said severely, "not people with horns. I'm very disappointed." "They were taking a consuming interest in you, master," said Jack. "Well, you can't blame them for that," said the Scarecrow, brushing his lapels and shaking out the remains of his coat. "But I must say, Jack, they shouldn't be allowed out with a goat herd. We shan't let that happen in Spring Valley." "Spring Valley? Oh, I remember. How did you manage to get a big estate, all full of, what was it, a farm and streams and wells and so on?" "Well, it's a puzzle, Jack," the Scarecrow admitted as they set off along the road. "I've always had an inner conviction that I was a man of property, a sort of gentleman farmer, you know. And is that where we're going, Spring Valley?" "In good time, Jack. We have to make our fortunes first." "Oh, I see. Well, look," said Jack, pointing ahead of them. "There's a farm and a farmer. Let's go and ask him for a job. That'll be a start." The farmer was sitting disconsolately outside his house, sharpening a scythe. "You want a job?" he said to Jack. "You couldn't have come at a better, you know. The soldiers took all my, away, and the birds are eating the as fast as it comes up. You set up him in the top field, and you can take the rattle and work in the orchard." "The thing is," said Jack, "he's getting a bit tattered. If you had a spare pair of trousers, he'd look a lot more realistic. There's a dirty old pair of, in the woodshed. Help yourself. There'll be a bite at sunset, and you can sleep in the barn." Soon afterward, they were at work. The Scarecrow shooed away all the birds from the cornfield, and from time to time he opened and shut his umbrella just to teach them a lesson. Jack roamed up and down the orchard, rattling hard whenever he saw a finch or linnet. It was hard work. The sun was hot, and there were plenty of birds to scare. Jack found himself thinking about Spring Valley and the Scarecrow's great estate. The poor noodle must have made it up and found himself believing it, Jack thought. He was good at that. It sounded like a nice place, though. At sunset, Jack stopped rattling and went to call the Scarecrow in. His master was very impressed by the rattle. "Formidable," he said when Jack showed him how it worked. "What a weapon! I don't suppose I could use it tomorrow." "Well, if you do, master, I won't have anything to scare the birds with. You're an expert, and you can do it just by looking at them, but I need all the help I can get. Now you go and sit down in the barn, and I'll fetch us some supper." The farmer's wife gave Jack a pot of stew and a big hunk of bread and told him not to come in the kitchen with that monster of his. Newfangled bird scares were all very well, but this was a respectable farm, and she couldn't be doing with mechanical monsters in the house. "Right-o, missus," said Jack. "Any chance of a drink?" "There's a bucket in the well," she said, "and a tin cup on a string next to it." "Thank you," said Jack, and took his pot of stew to the barn, pausing for a good long swing of water on the way. But before he went into the barn, he stopped outside because he could hear voices. "Oh, yes," the Scarecrow was saying. "We fought off a dozen brigands, my servant and I." "Brigands?" said someone else. It was a female voice, and it was full of admiration. Jack walked in to find the Scarecrow sitting on a bale of straw, surrounded by a dozen rakes and hoes and broomsticks and spades and pitchforks. They were all leaning on the wall, listening respectfully. At least that's what it looked like until they realized Jack was there. Then they went back to looking like rakes and hoes and so on. "Ah, Jack, my boy," said the Scarecrow. "The farmer's wife gave me a bowl of stew for us," said Jack doubtfully, looking around. "You have most of it," said the Scarecrow. "I don't eat a great deal. A small piece of bread will be quite sufficient." So Jack sat down and tucked into the stew, which was full of peppers and onions and bits of bristly sausage. "I thought I heard voices, master," he said with his mouth full. "And so you did. I was just telling these ladies and gentlemen about our adventures." Jack looked around at the rakes and hoes and brooms. None of them moved or said a word. "Ah," said Jack, "right. As I was saying," the Scarecrow went on, "the brigands were a fearsome crew, armed to the teeth with their teeth, every single one. They trapped us in their cave, and—" "I thought you said it was a ruined castle," said a rake. "That's right, a ruined castle," said the Scarecrow cheerfully. Jack's hair was standing on end. It certainly seemed as if one of the rakes had spoken, but it was getting dark, and he was tired. He rubbed his eyes and felt them closing as fast as he could rub them open again. "Well, which?" demanded the rake. "Castle, next to a cave. My servant and I went in to investigate, and the next thing we knew, in came 24 brigands, or 36 probably. I hid in the corner, and Jack told them a story to send them to sleep, and then I loomed up like an apparition like this." The Scarecrow raised his arms and made a hideous face. Some of the smaller brooms flinched away, and a little fork squeaked in terror. "And the brigands turned tail and fled," the Scarecrow went on. "I thought about it since, and I've worked out the reason why. I think they were birds, and they were only disguised as brigands. Big birds," he explained, "sort of ostrich-sized. Very dangerous," he added. "You must be very brave," said a broom shyly. "Oh, I don't know," said the Scarecrow. "One gets used to danger in this line of work, but soon after that I entered a new profession. I went on the stage." Jack was lying down now. The last thing he noticed before he fell asleep was the Scarecrow beginning to act out the role he had taken in the play, only it seemed a much more important role than Jack remembered. And when it got to the point where Queen Dido fell in love with the Scarecrow and made him prime master, Jack realized he'd been asleep for some time. He woke up to find the sun in his eyes and the Scarecrow shaking him. "Jack, wake up! Time for work! The birds have been up for some time, but Jack, I need to have a word with you, in private." Jack rubbed his eyes and looked around. "We are in private," he said. "No, I mean more private," the Scarecrow said in an urgent whisper. "Away from, you know." He gestured over his shoulder and nodded backward in a meaningful way. "Ah, I see," said Jack, who had no idea what he was talking about. "Just give me a moment, and I'll meet you out by the well, master." The Scarecrow nodded and strode out of the barn. Jack scratched his head. The rakes and hoes and brooms were perfectly still and silent. "Must have been dreaming," Jack said to himself and got up. The farmer's wife gave him some bread and jam for breakfast, and Jack took it out to the well, where the Scarecrow was waiting impatiently. "What is it, master?" he said. "I've decided to get married," the Scarecrow told him. "As a matter of fact, I've fallen in love. Oh, Jack, she's so beautiful, and such a delicate nature. You'd never believe it, but I feel almost clumsy beside her. Her grace, her charm. Oh, my heart is lost. I love her. I worship the ground she brushes." "Brushes?" said Jack, his mouth full. "She's a broom," the Scarecrow explained. "You must have noticed her, the very pretty one, the lovely one. Oh, I adore her." "Have you told her?" "Ah, that's what I was going to tell you. I haven't got the nerve, Jack. My courage fails me. As soon as I look at her, I feel like an onion." "An onion?" "Yes, just like an onion. but I can't think of the thing to say, so you'll have to tell her. Jack scratched his head. Well, he said, I'm not as eloquent as you are, master. I'd probably get it all wrong. I'm sure she'd rather hear from you. Well, of course she would, agreed, said the Scarecrow. Anyone would, but I'm struck dumb when I see her, so it'll have to be you. I don't understand why you feel like an onion, Jack said. No, neither do I. I had no idea what that love would have that effect. Have you ever been in love, Jack? I don't think so. I fell in love. If I fell in love, I'd probably feel like a turnip. Listen, I tell you what, master. I know, you could pretend to be a bird and attack her, and I could pretend to come and fight you off. I bet she'd be impressed by that. I'm not a good actor like you, master. She'd probably guess I wasn't a real bird. Listen, let's go and do some work, and you can think about her all day long out in the cornfield. We'll talk about it later before we come in. Yes, that's a good idea, said the Scarecrow, and marched off proudly to start the day's work. Chapter 6, A Serenade. Jack worked hard all morning. At midday, the farmer came into the orchard to see how he was getting on and looked around approvingly. That other fellow, he said, your mate, my master, said Jack. As you like him. He's a good worker, and no mistake, but, well, you know. Oh, he's good at scarecrowing, said Jack. No doubt about it, but, he's a bit, well, isn't he? Only if you don't know him. Oh, is that right? Then he's a deep character, said Jack, rattling at a blackbird. Ah, said the farmer. Thing is, he looks almost, well, if I didn't know better, I'd even say, you know, that's part of his cleverness. See, when he's working, he never kind of thing. No, said the farmer. Wouldn't do to, there'd be no end of, too true. You're right there, all the same, eh? Yes, agreed Jack. No, it'd be terrible if, a word to the wise, eh? Said the farmer, and winked and tapped his side of the nose. Jack did the same in case it was the private signal of a secret society. The farmer nodded and went away. Well, it's a good thing he didn't go and say all that to the master, Jack thought. The poor ninny wouldn't have understood a word. He rattled away busily all afternoon, and as the sun was setting, he went to call the Scarecrow from the top of the field. Jack, the Scarecrow said the Scarecrow, I've been thinking about her all day, just as you suggested, and I've come to the conclusion that if she won't marry me, I'll have to do something desperate. Oh dear, said Jack. What would that be, master? I'm saving that till tomorrow to think about. Good idea. I wonder what's for supper. The farmer's wife gave them another bowl of stew, and she gave the Scarecrow a long, hard, suspicious look, too, which he didn't see, because he was gazing at the barn with a dopey expression on his turnip. Thank you, missus, Jack said. You mind you keep him locked up at night, said the farmer's wife. I don't like the look of him. If I find any hens missing. Jack and his master sat down beside the well, and once again the Scarecrow let Jack have all the stew and only nibbled at a piece of bread. You ought to eat something, master, said Jack. I bet she'd like you just as much if you had a full belly. You'd feel better anyway. No, I've got no appetite, Jack. I'm wasting away with love. If you're sure, then, said Jack, finishing off the stew. I know, said the Scarecrow, sitting up suddenly and opening his umbrella with excitement. I could serenade her. Well, said Jack, but the Scarecrow was too excited to listen. Yes, that's it. Here's the plan. Wait till dark, and then pick her up and pretend to sweep the floor. And sweep her outside, and then sort of casually lean her against the wall, and then I'll sing to her. Well, Jack began again. Oh, yes, when she hears me sing, her heart will be mine. You better not sing too loud. I don't think the farmer'd like it. I'm sure that his old lady wouldn't. Oh, I shall be very discreet, said the Scarecrow. Tender but ardent is the note to strike. That sounds about right, said Jack. Start sweeping as soon as the moon shines into the farmyard. I think moonlight would show me to advantage, don't you? Maybe you better let me tidy you up, said Jack, and he dusted Scarecrow's shoulders and put some fresh straw on his chest and washed his turnip. There, you look a treat. Remember, not too loud now. The Scarecrow sat down outside the barn, and Jack went inside to lie down. Before he did, though, he found the broom and put her beside the door so that he'd be able to find her in the dark. Excuse me, he found himself saying, but I hope you don't mind if I put you over here. You'll find out why when the moon comes up. She didn't reply, but she leaned against the wall very gracefully. Jack thought she must be shy, until he caught himself and shook his head. He's got me believing she's alive, he thought. I'd better be careful in case I go as mad as he is. He lay down on the straw and closed his eyes. The old donkey and the cow were asleep on their feet, just breathing quietly and chewing a bit from time to time, and it was all very quiet and peaceful. Jack woke up when the moonlight touched his eyes. He yawned and stretched and sat up. Well, he said to himself, time to start brushing the floor. This is a daft idea. Still, he's a marvel, the master, no doubt about it. He took the broom and swept the floor, brushing all the straw and dust casually toward the door, where the moonlight was shining through. Once he was outside, he leaned the broom against the wall and yawned again before going back to lie down. And almost at once he went back to sleep. He must have started dreaming straight away, because it seemed as if he were watching the Scarecrow sweeping the ground outside, singing to the broom as he did so. Your handle so slender, your bristles so tender, I have to surrender my heart to your charms. Retreating, advancing, and secretly glancing. Oh, never stop dancing all night in my arms. Jack blinked and rubbed his eyes, but it made no difference. The Scarecrow and the broom were waltzing around the barnyard like the most beautiful, graceful dancers at a ball. Your gentle demeanor sweeps everything cleaner. I never have seen a more elegant miss. So gracious, so charming, completely disarming. Oh, where is the harm in a maidenly kiss? Jack dreamed. He's going to marry her, and then he won't want a servant anymore. Mind you, he does look happy, but I don't know if I'll ever find a master I'd rather serve. And while he was lying there puzzled by all those thoughts, he was awoken up all of a sudden by a horrible, raucous yell. Hee-haw, hee-haw. He sat up and realized first that it had been a dream, and the second, that the old donkey in the barn was braying and stamping and creating no end of a fuss, and third, that outside in the barnyard the Scarecrow was roaring and howling and bellowing with anger or distress or misery. Jack scrambled to the door of the barn to see the farmer's wife in a long nightdress running out of the kitchen door with a frying pan held high above her head. Behind her, the farmer in a long nightshirt was fumbling with a blunterness. The Scarecrow was clutching the broom to his heart. The real tears were streaming down his turnip. No, missus, no, don't, Jack shouted, and ran out to try and heat off the farmer's wife, who was about to wallop the Scarecrow with a frying pan. There was no danger from the farmer. As soon as he tried to aim the blunderbuss, all the lead shot fell out of the end of the barrel and bounced off the flagstones like hail. Jack reached the Scarecrow just as the farmer's wife did, and stood between them with his arms held wide. No, missus, stop. Let me explain, he said. I'll brain him, she cried. I'll teach him to go caterwauling in the middle of the night and terrifying honest folk out of their beds. No, don't, missus. He's poor zany. He doesn't mean any harm. You leave him to me. I told you, said the farmer, staying safely behind his wife. Didn't I, eh? Yes, you did, Jack agreed. You told me something anyway. None of this, you know, the farmer added. You take the horrible thing away, said the farmer's wife, and you get out of here right now, and don't you come back. Certainly, missus, said Jack. And what about your wages? Our wages. Wages, she said. You're not getting any wages. Clear off, you and your monster both. Jack turned to the Scarecrow, who hadn't heard any of what the farmer's wife had said. In fact, he was still sobbing in despair. Now then, master, what's the trouble? Jack said. She's already engaged, said the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow howled. She's going to marry a rake. Oh, that's bad luck, said Jack. Still, look on the bright side. I shall do the decent thing, of course, the Scarecrow went on, struggling to control his emotions. My dear young lady, he said to the broom, nothing would make me stand between you and your happiness if your heart is already given to the gentleman in the barn. But I warn him, he said, raising his voice and looking in at all the tools leaning on the wall. He had better treat this broom like the precious creature she is, and make her happiness the center of his life, or he will face my wrath. With a last choking sob, he handed the broom gently to Jack. Jack took her into the barn and stood her next to the rake. When he got back outside, the Scarecrow was speaking to the farmer and his wife. I am sorry for waking you up, he said, but I make no excuses for the passionate expression of my feelings. After all, that is the one thing that distinguishes us from the animals. Mad, said the farmer's wife. Barmy, go on. Get out, clear off down the road, and don't come back. The Scarecrow bowed as gracefully as he could. Well, dear, the farmer said, mustn't, you know, not so many, about these days, eh? Sort of, thing. He's raving mad. I want him gone, she said. Also, he's a horrible-looking monster, and he's frightened the donkey. Scram, she said again, raising the frying pan. Come on, master, said Jack. We'll seek our fortune somewhere else. We've slept under hedges before, and it's a nice warm night. So side by side, the Scarecrow and his servant set off down the moonlit road. From time to time, the Scarecrow would sigh heavily and turn back with such a look of anguish on his turnip that Jack felt sure the broom would leave her rake and fall in love with him if she could, but it was too late. Oh, yes, said the farmer. He was definitely, you know. Mad as a hatter, said the wife. A dangerous lunatic, foreign too. Shouldn't have been let out. I see, said Mr. Circarelli. And when did he leave? When was it now, said the farmer. About, middle of the night, snapped his wife. What do you want to know for anyway? You was keeper? In a manner of speaking, that is so. I am charged by my employer to bring the Scarecrow back where he belongs. Ah, said the farmer. So it's a case of, is it? I beg your pardon? You know, touch of the old, as it were, eh? Mr. Ciccarelli gathered his papers and stood up. You put it very accurately, sir, he said. Thank you for your help. You going to lock him up when you catch him? Demanded the farmer's wife. Oh, I can assure you, said Mr. Ciccarelli. That is the least of it. Chapter 7, The Misty Cart. Jack, said the Scarecrow next morning, now that my heart is broken, I think we should set out on the open road and seek our fortune. What about your estate in Spring Valley, master? Ah, yes, indeed. We must earn enough money to set the place in order. Then we shall go back and look after it. I hope there's plenty of food there, Jack thought. The Scarecrow strode out briskly, and Jack trotted along beside him. There were plenty of things to look at, and although the Scarecrow's heart was broken, his curiosity about the world was undimmed. Why has that building burned down? He'd say, or I wonder why that old lady is climbing a ladder. Or, do you know, Jack, it's an extraordinary thing, but we haven't heard a bird for hours. Why would that be, do you think? I think the soldiers have been here, Jack told him. They probably burned the house down and took all the farm workers away, so the old lady's got to mend the roof herself. As for the birds, why, the soldiers must have eaten up all the food and left none for the birds, not even a grain of wheat. Said the Scarecrow. Soldiers, huh? Do they do that sort of thing? They're the worst people in the world, soldiers, said Jack. Worse than birds? Much worse. The only thing to do when the soldiers come is hide and keep very, very quiet. What do they look like? Well, but before Jack could answer, the Scarecrow's attention was caught by something else. Look, he cried, pointing in excitement. What's that? There was a caravan coming toward them, pulled by an ancient horse that was too skinny you could count all its ribs. The caravan was covered in painted stars and moons and mystic symbols, and sitting on the box holding the reins was a man almost as skinny as the horse, wearing a long pointed hat and a robe covered in more stars and moons. The Scarecrow gazed at it all with great admiration. As soon as he saw them, the man waved and shook the reins to make the horse stand still. The poor old beast was only too glad to have a rest. The man jumped off the box and scampered over to the Scarecrow. Good day to you, sir. Good day, my lord, he said, bowing low and plucking at the Scarecrow's sleeve. Good day to you, sir, the Scarecrow said. Master, said Jack, I don't think. But the stranger with the mystic robes had seized the Scarecrow's roadside hand and was scrutinizing it closely. Ah, he said. Aha, ha, I see great fortune in this hand. Really? Said the Scarecrow, impressed. How do you do that? By means of the mystic arts. Oh, said the Scarecrow. Jack, we must get a misty cart, just like this gentleman's one. Then we'd know things, too. We can make our fortune and find our way to Spring Valley and take it. Spring Valley, did you say, sir? Said the stranger. Would you be a member of the celebrated Buffalini family, my lord? I don't think so, said the Scarecrow. Ah, I understand. They've called you in as a consultant to take it in hand. I hear that the Buffalinis are doing splendid things in the field of industry, draining all those springs and wells and putting up wonderful factories. Yes? No? Seeing that the Scarecrow was baffled, the astrologer smoothly went on. But let me read your horoscope and look deep into the crystal ball. Before the power of my gaze, the veil of time is drawn aside and the mysteries of the future are revealed. Come into my caravan for a consultation. Master, Jack whispered, this will cost us money, and we haven't got any. Besides, he's an old friend. He's an old fraud. Oh, no, my boy, you've got it wrong, said the Scarecrow. I'm a pretty good judge, and this gentleman's mind is on higher things than fraud. His thoughts dwell in the realm of the sublime, Jack. Quite right, sir. You are a profound and perceptive thinker, said the mystic, beckoning them into the caravan and uncovering a crystal ball on a little table. They all sat down, waving his fingers in a mystical way. The astrologer peered deeply into the crystal.